Welcome to the iATAC Soccer Podcast, an educational resource for parents and players focused on soccer development.
We sit down with top players, coaches, and industry experts to explore their journey to greatness in the game. I'm Michael Wright.
And I'm Chris Martinez. Together we have a combined 50-plus years of coaching, training, and playing experience, spanning from youth soccer to the professional level.
What you're about to enjoy is a free preview of our podcast episode. The full episode is only available to our premium members.
To become a member, visit iatacsoccer.com. Today we're honored to welcome a guest whose career is a masterclass in resilience, leadership, and defensive excellence. Ike Opara established himself as one of Major League Soccer's elite defenders, earning 2 MLS Defender of the Year awards and multiple Best 11 honors. From winning an NCAA championship at Wake Forest to lifting trophies with Sporting Kansas City, Ike consistently set the standard for top-level defending.
Now an assistant coach with Sporting Kansas City 2 in MLS Next Pro, Ike brings a wealth of experience to player development. His journey offers invaluable lessons for players, coaches, and parents, covering everything from overcoming setbacks to excelling at the highest levels and transitioning into coaching.
Today we'll explore his path to the pros, the mindset that made him an elite defender, and the insights he's now passing on to the next generation. Ike, welcome to the podcast. All right, Ike. Well, first and foremost, thanks so much for lending us some time today. And I will kind of do a little backstory for the listeners and viewers. I was there at Sporting KC from 2018 to 2022. And then in 22 left to go be an assistant coach with the first team at the Houston Dynamo. So I certainly know what your day entails there, how busy it is, and all those things. So thanks for being with us and giving us a portion of your day.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm in that same office that you were in.
Yeah, I recognize it.
So some big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
But no, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, Ike, just on my side, it's an honor to have you on here. And I think for the listeners, this is going to be an amazing and very unique episode having you on. You're a very, very special individual just as a person, number one, but as a player, your accomplishments of what you did in college and then into the pros is really not matched by many. It's amazing. And I just want our listeners to know that this episode is going to be filled with incredible insights, guidance, and I think resilience because of your career. And I know this episode will go for 45 minutes, maybe an hour, but just for the listeners up front, there's not that many athletes that have achieved the pinnacles that you've achieved and gone through the injuries that you have gone through, and we're going to talk about that because there's a lot of young players that may get injured, and they may think, hey, this is really tough to bounce back. I have a huge setback, but we will touch upon your greatness in the game as well as your ability to overcome many of these setbacks. So this is going to be an exciting episode, and I'm really excited to talk to you today. So we'll get going.
So just in saying that, Ike, obviously, Mike mentioned the word resilience. So for you, over the course of your career, trials and tribulations, potential setbacks that you overcame, just kind of elaborate on that for the listeners and give us a better idea of what exactly that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I had a very interesting career, really since the youth days all the way to my pro career ended. Whether it was injuries, and that's a large part of my story, but some of it was just maybe being overlooked in the recruiting process, being overlooked maybe by some coaches, and maybe my abilities and what I believed what I could do. So always trying to prove people, and not necessarily that they drove me, right? But or I let it drive, let it control me, but always showing that no one knows me, or at least no one knows you better than yourself, and I knew what I had to give and what I could give. And so, these injuries that I had, which I'm sure we'll touch on exactly in detail, they provided the character that I think I already always had to overachieve and to push on and be better from it, whether it was physically or just mentally. So For me, I think that's probably one of the biggest characteristics that that's a part of me is my resiliency, and obviously my mentality in a lot of ways. But I would say it's probably in IQ maybe, but I think resiliency is one that defines me quite often, and one that I've actually kind of prided myself on.
Okay, so we'll get into those moments in your career so people can really understand what you went through. But I want to go back to the beginning days. You mentioned it just seconds ago, where people didn't quite understand who you were as an athlete. You might have been overlooked in the recruiting process. But tell the listeners about how you embraced kind of the multi-sport athlete and that approach when you were younger, and how that helped you out later on in your sports development. Let's just touch on playing multiple sports and maybe your journey as a younger athlete. It wasn't as defined, I think, as much as these academy players are now. You took a different approach. Could you let the audience know your journey there?
For sure. Yeah, I did. And soccer was always my love and the sport that I enjoyed maybe the most. But I did enjoy baseball and basketball and soccer, right? And those are the three sports I played, for a large part of my youth career until, at some point I needed to drop a sport because the travel soccer and all that was just becoming too much for me and my family. So towards like high school, I focused on basketball and soccer as my two. And I think as much as, it took, when I was in basketball season, it took time away from maybe being, on the pitch and practicing certain things in soccer. I think that especially at that time, right, I was a very athletic player. And so I think some soccer coaches maybe saw me as more raw in a lot of ways, where I saw it as, well, I'm playing basketball and soccer, but there's a cross being between both sports that I felt like I was becoming better, especially in a lot of defensive actions on the soccer field, right? Because I think there's obviously a lot of movement in basketball and things like that. And so it's funny because I was kind of a defensive stopper. That was one of my biggest traits in basketball as well. And there are a lot of parallels between the two sports. Like I said, lateral movement, how you close out. It's no different in certain ways, closing out, a player out wide on the soccer field. The angles that you take to get around the screen or get under the screen, no different than getting the angles with a soccer player or, with a nine or a winger, and the approach that you take and the footwork that's needed, right? So there was a lot of similarities to both that I felt like I was actually honing my game. And I realized in the moment, that wasn't one of those things that I look back on. I'm like, I benefited from that. And I actually could tell in the moment that there were a lot of things that it was honing my soccer game just on the basketball floor.
Yeah.
So with that being said, obviously the parallels, the similarities, and the different facets that kind of overlap between the two sports. Your youth soccer experience, were you a highly recruited player? Obviously, I'll let you answer that, but we know the end result, your time in Wake Forest, but kind of touch on the recruiting process and what that looked like, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's funny because I ended up at a very good school, one of the best probably, the last few decades, right? But I was a weirdly recruited player, I'll say that. I had,
I'm sorry, what were you?
a weirdly recruited player.
Okay.
Weirdly recruited.
It was unique. Okay.
Yeah, I had some big schools that were interested and some big schools that just didn't see it. And I had some mid-majors that loved me and then some mid-majors that didn't see it. Like, I felt like I was like on one end of the spectrum or the other with everybody, and I rarely was in the middle or in between. And so I think for me, like, it kind of was a weird process because I also, during the heat of my recruiting battle, I got hurt. And so I missed, my junior year for the most part, which is a big year, especially back then, but still even
Huge
today
year.
of recruiting.
Right.
So, I had even some of the schools that were, interested, whatever level they were at. Once I got injured, that kind of started to pull away from me because they were either filling the scholarship spot or the roster spot. And so, like, Clemson was a prime example. Like, that was one of the bigger schools that recruited me that actually, liked me. And I went down an official visit there and I loved it. And it was kind of like one of those, this is going to be your scholarship. We just have to have the head coach kind of approve it. And I got hurt during that time. And so the head coach never really got to come see me and watch me. And then when I got back healthy, I was kind of like, hey, I'm back available. I know that it wasn't necessarily finalized, but I've been, gun ho on wanting to be here. And I went from, that scholarship's not even available to we don't even have a roster spot for you. And so I kind of
Wow.
had to restart the whole thing over again. And
Absolutely.
yeah, really.
What was the injury?
At that time, it was right foot sesamoid fracture in my right big toe.
Okay.
I didn't know how much you needed the big toe until you lose the function of the big toe.
Thank you for tuning into this special preview of our podcast. What you just heard is only the first 10 minutes of the episode.
If you want full access to this episode, plus all other guest episodes, visit iATACsoccer.com and become a premium member for only $9.95 a month.
Lastly, your support will help us to provide high-quality soccer content without relying on ads.
Visit iATACsoccer.com and join our community.